Greetings, Crocoduck Army. Well, I just returned home from my invasion of Scotland, and I'd say it was pretty successful. I saw some really beautiful and interesting places, and plenty of war plunder was brought back that I paid for with very colorful Scottish Monopoly money, which is somehow not exactly the British pound, but it's pegged to the pound in value, but it's propped up by the banks that are currently being propped up by the taxpayers who use the Scottish pound. Now, I don't entirely understand this arrangement, but they did take the money in exchange for a nice 26-year-old single malt whiskey, so I guess it works. I know this is blasphemy to most Scots, but I still think most whiskey tastes terrible. The food in Scotland is very hearty, with lots of blood sausage, venison sausage, pork sausage, and bacon, which Americans would actually consider baked ham, but it's good just the same. Neeps and tatties are turnips and potatoes, another staple of the Scottish diet, and while for this reason you might be able to get away with asking a Scottish woman to show you her tatties, I wouldn't recommend it to strangers, unless of course you want a Glasgow kiss, which is a headbutt to the nose. Just as I warned you Scots before I left, I did in fact eat some of your cows, though since a lot of that beef consumption was actually in the form of your native specialty, haggis, I'd be hard-pressed to tell you exactly which parts of the cows I actually ate. I suspect it was some combination of highly tenderized hooves and pieces of their nether regions that nobody else will eat. Since I don't really know for sure what the parts were though, it doesn't bother me in the slightest, and I'm happy to say that I enjoyed it every time I had it. Yeah, I know, it's probably minced bull testicles or something. I found Scottish culture quite fascinating and more distinct from England's than I expected. The countryside in the Highlands is breathtakingly beautiful, including the Isle of Skye, which I thoroughly enjoyed as well. I sometimes felt like the Loch Ness Monster legend propped up the local economies of some Highland towns single-handedly, but I didn't find anyone silly enough to believe that Nessie actually exists. Highland cows are very popular with tourists, and I admit they're very cute, though they seem pretty indifferent to human attention, so I didn't hug any of them. I saw lots of castles, including Edinburgh Castle, Cotter Castle, Stirling Castle, Eilean Donan, and more. Some were more like military installations, some more like a lavish residence, some more like ruins, and some more like museums, but they were all interesting in their various ways. Speaking of interesting, the accents in Glasgow could definitely be impenetrable, as some of you warned me in advance. We were buying some food, and the total came to £13.30, and I swear this is not an intentional exaggeration of what he said. It sounded like he said, "Thatty," to which I said, "What?" Just when I thought Scotland was a little oasis of some kind of strange but almost conflict-free alternate reality, though, good old religion popped up while I was there, in a very odd and unexpected way. I was nearing the end of the trip, and Mrs. Zaunstar and I were on Buchanan Street in Glasgow, one of the main shopping areas in the city. We noticed a large and increasing number of policemen around in bright yellow vests. I also saw a little makeshift kiosk for the Scottish branch of the BNP, Britain's own ultra-nationalist party, spouting their usual nonsense. Figuring the police must be here for more than this little fringe group, I asked one of the officers about the heavy police presence. He said, "Oh, it's because there's about to be an Orange March." Apparently there are a significant number of Scots who still happily promote Christian sectarian rivalry, closely related to what has existed in a more violent form in Northern Ireland until relatively recently, and the Protestants were marching today. I said to him, "Even Scotland can't escape that nonsense?" He said, "Unfortunately not." That explains the guy who randomly informed us he was Catholic while giving us directions. Speaking of sectarianism, soccer is a big deal in Scotland, as with the rest of Europe and much of the world. The Glasgow Rangers apparently are in administration, which is essentially the British way of saying bankrupt, and depending on who you ask, this is either thrilling or devastating. We were also warned not to bring it up to the locals, and the occasional band of tough-looking young men walking around with a few battle scars on their faces was enough to convince me of the wisdom of that advice. I stuck to tennis because Andy Murray was the hot topic while I was there, and everyone seemed to love him. There's also a Scottish independence movement that's trying to gain steam, and while most people seem to think that it won't pass, everyone seems to think there will be trouble when the independence vote gets closer. Hopefully they're wrong, cooler heads will prevail, and prosperous times will be ahead for Scotland, because I enjoy and respect Scottish culture way too much to want that to happen.